It was a hot and sultry day in King's Landing. Robert Baratheon was dying of boredom at the Red Keep's hall. He heard his advisors at the small council, a royal meeting he seldom bothered to attend, but he barely listened to their droning. The sedative afternoon was suddenly spurred by an envoy rapidly entering the room and handing a sealed letter to the attending maester. Grand Maester Pyke cautiously removed the seal and, in a voice edged with fear, read out, "The Greyjoys of the Iron Islands have rebelled." Hearing this, Robert stood up and, turning with his hands behind his back, walked over to the window. He looked down at the kingdom's capital. If one could have seen his face at that very moment, one would have seen that even as his eyes blazed, a faint smile played across his lips. War was coming. It is the year 281 after Aegon's conquest. The Seastone Chair of the Iron Islands belongs to Quellon Greyjoy, Lord Reaper of Pyke. His domain, a sparsely populated archipelago, is home to the Iron Men, fierce seafaring people with their own distinctive culture and faith in the drowned god. For centuries, rather than cultivating their barren soil, their forebears excelled in raiding and pillaging the mainland of Westeros, which they commonly referred to as Greenlands. Their tradition of reaving and plundering was known as the Old Way, and while occupations like trading or fishing were widespread and respected, farming and mining garnered little esteem. These unpopular activities for Ironborn were instead mostly reserved for their captured servants, the thralls. These ancient customs, however, faded considerably after Aegon's conquest, and even further during the rule of Lord Quellon, who was considered both a strong and wise ruler, eager to integrate his domain with the rest of the Seven Kingdoms. Quellon attempted to reform the ways of his men by freeing thralls, discouraging reaving, promoting marriages with the mainland, and employing maesters from the citadel. 9 sons had been sired from the loins of Quellon Greyjoy, but only 5 had lived long enough to wield an axe. His sons, unlike their more composed father, followed the traditional rash ways of the Ironborn. The war against the Mad King that broke out in the year 282 didn't bother the remote island lord at first, but his eldest sons convinced him to join the fray just after the Battle of the Trident in order to get their share of the war spoils. Lord Quellon reluctantly agreed and sailed 50 longships south to plunder the fertile coasts of the Reach. But this insignificant raid brought unexpected consequences for the Iron Men. While sailing the mouth of the Mander, their fleet was ambushed by longships of the Shield Islands. Battle ensued, and while the Greyjoys won the encounter, they incurred losses. A part of their fleet was sunk, but more importantly, Lord Quellon was slain. Subsequently, his oldest living son, Balon the Brave, decided to get back to Pyke at once and claimed the Seastone Chair for himself. The new lord of the Iron Islands' rule bore no resemblance to his father's. Just like his people, Lord Balon was proud, fearless, and quarrelsome. Upon claiming the lordship, he reversed most of Quellon's reforms and encouraged a return to the old way, hoping through this to restore the Ironborn to their former ancient glory. What's more, Balon ordered the construction of many new, bigger longships that eventually made the backbone of the formidable Iron Fleet, which were to serve him as the Lord Reaper of Pyke. It took him 5 long years to bolster his naval potential and attain widespread support from the houses inhabiting the Greyjoy's domain. By the year 288, Balon's position was uncontested, and his power grew significantly. The barren Iron Islands started to become too small to contain the ambitions of the Lord of Pyke, and he planned a secession against the Iron Throne in King's Landing. Balon was aware that the short yet bloody war of the usurper 5 years earlier had exhausted the Seven Kingdoms, while the Iron Islands had managed to avoid any considerable losses. Moreover, he perceived the rule of Robert Baratheon to be weak and lacking the support of the many noble houses of Westeros. Thus, Balon assumed that King Robert either wouldn't have sufficient following to assemble an army strong enough to challenge the Greyjoys, or wouldn't risk a campaign on the remote, unfertile Iron Islands, which were of meager value to Robert. The rebellion began the moment Balon, son of the Sea Wind, proclaimed himself the king of the Iron Islands and bestowed upon himself the self-fashioned title of King of Salt and Rock. It was the year 289. Balon's first step to secure his rule was to disable the naval potential of the most dangerous power in the region, the domain of canny Lord Tywin Lannister. The Iron Fleet, under Balon's younger brothers, Euron and Victarion, sailed unnoticed to Lannisport and ambushed the Lannister fleet anchored there. In no time, Tywin's entire fleet had either been sunk or burnt up in flames following Victarion's bold action. Through this quick, audacious move, Balon Greyjoy achieved naval superiority on the Sunset Sea and for a time secured the independence of the Iron Islands. In the meantime, Balon's firstborn son and heir, Roderick, led the Greyjoys' attack on the port town and castle of Seaguard in the Riverlands, which had originally been built to protect the coast from Ironborn raids. Following the rules of the Old Way, the Iron Men found starving a castle out unworthy, and Roderick made a bold attempt to storm the castle. It was a quick and ferocious struggle, which ended disastrously as Lord Jason Mallister of Seaguard slew Balon's heir beneath the castle's walls and pushed his army back to the sea. There were considerable losses on both sides, and Balon's rebellion faced its first major setback. But the Iron Fleet under Victarion Greyjoy stood strong and ravaged the coasts of the Reach and Westerlands in subsequent moons. Sailing his longships south through the Straits of Fair Isle, Victarion, much to his surprise, encountered the vast war fleet of Arbor led by Lord Paxter Redwyne. Considering his options, it soon became clear to Victarion that he had gotten himself trapped in the strait. Coming from the north, a formidable royal fleet under King Robert's younger brother, Lord Stannis Baratheon, furiously rammed into the confused Ironborn. Coming from the south, Lord Paxter Redwyne also attacked, closing the pincer on the Iron Fleet. The Iron Fleet, though made up of many capable men and large, well-crafted warships, could not hold in the face of such tactical disadvantage. Stannis knew that the Ironborn were fierce warriors, unparalleled at sea, but he also knew that they were no soldiers and severely lacked discipline and strategy. The sea battle, or Fair Isle, ended as a disastrous calamity for the Greyjoys, and although both Euron and Victarion managed to retreat unscathed, the proud Iron Fleet was completely destroyed by Stannis, Royal Master of Ships, and his towering war galleys. It was a crushing defeat, yet uncompromising King Balon refused to bend the knee, and despite the loss of his most fearsome asset, he continued the rebellion. Though much of Greyjoy's naval potential was eradicated, Balon's unbending attitude was an excellent reason for King Robert to unite the houses of Westeros under a common banner and invade the Iron Islands, thus indirectly solidifying his rule over the Seven Kingdoms. Robert was an avid warrior, and warfare was his element. With court duties bland and unamusing, Balon's secession was an opportune pretext to get away from King's Landing and to at last make use of his warhammer again. Thanks to Stannis' victory off Fair Isle, Robert could transport troops and siege engines to invade the Iron Islands. He had a unique ability to unite people under his banners, and soon minor lords from every corner of Westeros joined the king's expedition, all hungry for glory. United behind Robert, the allies brought the full power of Westeros to the Iron Islands. Stannis led the invasion of the biggest island, the Great Wick, while Sir Barristan Selmy, Lord Commander of the King's Guard, assaulted the holy island of Oldwick. Other islands were attacked as well, but Robert saved Pyke, the seat of House Greyjoy, for himself and his childhood friend, Lord Eddard Stark. Unruly Ironmen made the takeover of each island a fierce struggle, and hundreds, if not thousands, died in the process. Royal forces stormed the busy port and trade centre of Lordsport, razing it to the ground. The ensuing siege of the island stronghold of Pyke was impetuous and brutal. The king's forces tore down parts of the wall and main watchtower of the castle. Balon's second son, Meryn, died when one of the towers fell on top of him. Undermanned, Greyjoy's garrison fought bravely, but their fierceness could not make up for their meager numbers, and soon the invaders had breached a path to the main castle. The first to enter the breach was Thoros of Myr with his flaming sword. The second to enter the breach was Jorah Mormont of Bear Island. Even at the castle, Ironborn refused to surrender. Many more died in the close quarters fighting. Eventually, seeing the casualties, Balon Greyjoy realized that his cause was lost. His rebellion met a bloody end, and Balon kneeled to Robert and swore fealty to the Iron Throne. Stannis advised Robert to put Balon to the sword for his treachery, but Robert spared the Iron Lord, possibly being influenced by the Honorable Lord Stark. It was a crushing defeat for House Greyjoy. The proud Iron Fleet was destroyed, and 2 of Balon's oldest sons had been killed during the rebellion. Although Balon got his lordship restored, his only surviving son, 10-year-old Theon, was taken as a hostage by Lord Eddard, becoming a ward of House Stark. Should Balon the Brave challenge the Iron Throne again, Theon's head would be cut off by Lord Stark's ancestral greatsword. The rebellion found its resolution, and King Robert held a great tourney at Lannisport to celebrate his victory. He spent the revels boasting about the campaign and how he would have torn the island into the waves if Balon hadn't bent the knee. Feeling unassailable, Robert Baratheon's position as king was greatly strengthened. More importantly, many of the smaller pieces that would later affect the great Game of Thrones had been cleverly put into place.
Okay, enough of that.